Okay, let's dive into this explainer and fundamentally shatter everything you thought you knew about the ancient world's most famous trade route. When we hear Silk Road, our minds usually jump straight to vibrant colors, exotic spices, and the thrilling exchange of ancient philosophies, right? Well, today, we're going to uncover the hidden microscopic cargo that hitched a ride alongside all that wealth. We're looking at how the very network that built the ancient world kind of tore it apart. Now, what's really fascinating here is the contrast. Our romanticized vision is just filled with gold, paper, and those beautiful shimmering threads spun by insects in China that Rome had an absolutely insatiable appetite for. But alongside those physical treasures traveled a silent, invisible passenger. The grim reality is this network wasn't just a conduit for wealth. It was literally a superhighway for bacteria, viruses, and death. So, keep this chilling question in the back of your mind as we go through this. What if the world's first global highway was actually a conduit for destruction? Every step forward in ancient globalization, every new connection made between distant empires, inadvertently laid the groundwork for some of the most devastating demographic shifts in human history. Let's move to part 1, the Silk Road's dark secret. To really grasp the magnitude of this unseen biological exchange, we have to look at the sheer geographic scale. This wasn't just a single, well-paved, dusty trail. We're talking about a sprawling, complex tapestry of land and sea routes spanning an incredible 4,000 miles. It snaked through treacherous mountain passes, crossed scorching deserts, and followed fertile river valleys. Each segment of that grueling journey, every single trading post, every bustling oasis, served as a waiting room for contagion. It was, essentially, an absolutely massive cross-continental incubator. Moving into part 2, anatomy of ancient contagion. To understand how these microscopic harbingers of death thrived, we have to look at the perfect petri dish that was the ancient world. Populations back then were essentially defenseless. Even with absolute marvels of engineering like Roman aqueducts and early sewer systems, sanitation was still incredibly rudimentary. Cities were dense, crowded, you get the picture. But the real kicker? They had zero concept of germ theory. Epidemics were blamed on miasma, which they genuinely believed was just bad air, or divine punishment, or even the alignment of the stars. Because their preventative measures were based purely on superstition, they were completely unprepared for a microscopic onslaught. Let's track a single, terrifying journey step by step, just to see how a simple stop at a trading post turned into a deadly global exchange. Imagine a merchant in Chang'an, the vibrant capital of the Han Dynasty, packing up his finest silks. Step 2. An opportunistic flea, carrying a deadly pathogen, nestles perfectly into the coarse wool of his pack animal. Step 3. Our merchant travels westward, stops at a caravanserai, and mingles with folks from totally different lands. Step 4. That flea jumps ship, finds a new host, and suddenly, a localized disease is sprinting across a continent. And speaking of pack animals, we have to talk about the unsung villains of this story, the Bactrian camels. It wasn't just the human traders passing things along, guys. These iconic beasts of burden carrying your precious spices were literal mobile ecosystems. Their thick fur and digestive tracts provided a luxurious moving home for fleas, lice, and all sorts of organisms. Some totally fine, others incredibly deadly. When a camel fell ill, those parasites simply abandoned ship to find new hosts, and the cycle of transmission just kept repeating endlessly. Which brings us to the most dramatic part of our explainer. Part 3. Empires crippled by disease. Look at how these outbreaks act as a chronological map of destruction. We are looking at hidden, undeclared wars fought with biological weapons that literally toppled superpowers. In 980, epidemics heavily contributed to the fall of the Western Han Dynasty. Fast forward to 165 AD, and the Antonine Plague is absolutely ravaging the Roman Empire. Then, in the 6th century, the Sasanian Empire in Persia is severely weakened by the plague of Justinian. Notice a pattern here? These diseases hit these empires precisely when their global interconnectedness was at its absolute peak. Let's break down the data here, because it perfectly captures how these diseases didn't just cause individual tragedy, they fundamentally broke societies. In the Han Dynasty, widespread fevers fueled massive social unrest. For Rome, the Antonine Plague, which was likely smallpox or measles brought back by returning legions, decimated the army, crippled recruitment, and directly sparked the crisis of the 3rd century. And the Sasanian Empire? Their economy was crippled so badly by the plague that it left them completely vulnerable to Byzantine invasions. Now, we definitely can't talk about ancient pandemics without bringing up the heavy hitter, Yersinia pestis. This is the plague-causing bacterium originally endemic to rodents in Central Asia. And the resilience of pathogens like this one is astonishing. They literally evolved to exploit human connection. As merchants passed through incredibly crowded ancient metropolises like Palmyra or Samarkand, Yersinia pestis was right there, spreading with terrifying speed through bustling marketplaces and shared community wells. It's the exact same bacterium that will go on to cause the Black Death centuries later. That leads us to part 4, the cost of connection. As we wrap up this explainer, we have to look at the profound legacy here. While the loss of life was catastrophic, it's fascinating to see how the sheer terror of these recurring epidemics inadvertently forced ancient societies to adapt. Even without understanding germ theory, people started observing patterns of spread. This absolute desperation became a powerful, albeit completely unintentional, driver of early public health. We start to see the very first rudimentary quarantine measures, the appointment of public health officials in major cities, and a desperate renewed emphasis on basic hygiene. But the ultimate takeaway here is the concept of destructive biological homogenization. The Silk Road was a giant incubator that allowed completely isolated microbial populations to mix and spread across continents. Sure, it spread silk, it spread the alphabet, Buddhism, Christianity, absolutely, but more fundamentally, it spread the exact biological vulnerabilities that could bring entire civilizations to their knees. There's a quote from our source material that says, "Progress often comes with a price paid not just in gold and goods, but in the very lives that built those civilizations." And honestly, that beautifully encapsulates the dual nature of globalization. Those shimmering threads of silk were, in a very real way, laced with the unseen venom of disease. So I'll leave you with this final provocative thought to ponder. Does every expansion of human connection carry the seeds of its own destruction? As we continue to build our modern, hyper-connected world, it is definitely worth asking if we are still, in many ways, traveling along the poisoned veins of our own modern Silk Roads. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the history you think you know.